Hello and welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video. This is a frontline update for the Ukraine war, the 4th of February 2023. Let's get straight to it. We're going to go to the northeast sector, Kupiansk to Svatove to Kreminna. First of all, actually, we'll look at the shelling kind of heat map. Pretty significant shelling everywhere around the front line, really. Particularly in the Belgorod region. Now, we heard from, if you watched my news update this morning, that Ukraine had shelled the Russian oil depot in Belgorod. Well, there's a lot of shelling going on there. These, I think, are reports of shelling from Ukraine, from the General Staff of Ukraine. So these are Russians shelling Ukraine. And as you can see, right up and down the front line to Zaporizhia, we have significant shelling. So that is worthy of note. If we go to that northeast sector, Kupiansk to Svatove to Kreminna, it looks a little bit like this on my map. Not too much information from up in the Kupiansk area, Kuzmivka. I have changed my map a little bit to go in line actually with Poulet-Vallon's map that shows the Ukrainians pushing a little bit further, or the Russians back. So actually, arguably, it's not the control of the Ukrainians, but I have pushed the control. The idea I've heard from a few sources that the Ukrainians are on the western outskirts of Kuzmivka. But that could be wrong. I might have to pull it back to Novoselivska again. But that's certainly a grey zone, which I have had. And then we come down further down south past Svatove to the Ploshchanka, Chervonopepivka, Kreminna area. Apparently, this is the tensest part of the Luhansk front, according to one Russian military blogger. This Svatove to Kreminna part, although north of that, not too much going on. You go up to Kupiansk and then down south you've got Bilorivka, which is all part of that front. So I don't know how useful that statement is. But yeah, you've got quite a few comments going on in ISW as they're putting together quite a number of sources here. Russian forces apparently repelled Ukrainian advances in the Svatove Kreminna area, the tensest part of the front. As I said, another mill blogger claimed on February the 2nd that the 144th Motorized Rifle Division conducted successful operations in the Svatove Kreminna area, and Ukrainian forces committed reserves to the area overnight, although that's somewhat unspecified. The mill blogger also claimed that Ukrainian forces increased their rate of artillery fire and conducted some counterattacks, which Russian forces repelled. So it's not just that the Ukrainians are on the defensive there, as has been sort of suggested. The military blogger claimed that Russian forces conducted attacks in an unspecified area along the Svatove Kreminna line, breaking through Ukrainian forces' first line of defense. Well, we hear about this down in the Kreminna area in the Serebryansky forest. But anyway, let me continue. Russian forces intensified the pace of offensive operations west of Kreminna on February the 3rd. So this is to go down to this area towards Yampilivka, where apparently they're 2 kilometers away from Yampilivka. But there is also fierce fighting around Ploshchanka down the south in the this gully area where the Russians have pushed forward onto the heights there. Also, Chervonopepivka just below that. So, Serhiy Cherevati, who's the Ukrainian spokesman for the area, said yesterday that Russian forces increased their military activity in the Liman direction and conducted a record number of artillery strikes, 384, and 20 combat clashes. And they launched an offensive near the Balko-Zaravka Gully, northwest of Kreminna, as I just said. The mill blogger claimed that Ukrainian forces, retreated to their second line of defense after a Russian attack in the forest southwest of Kreminna. Another mill blogger claimed on February the 3rd that Russian forces attempted to advance near Chervonopepivka and Ploshchanka to push Ukrainian forces across the Zherebets River. Various Russian sources additionally claimed that Ukrainian troops took control of Bilorivka. Occupation Mayor of Lysychansk claimed on February 3rd that Ukrainian forces left their positions in Bilorivka, a claim that other mill bloggers amplified. Claims on the status of Bilorivka are conflicting. However, another military blogger claimed on February the 3rd that Russian forces attacked Bilorivka but could not take the settlement. Footage posted on February the 1st, that's a few days back, notably shows alleged Russian forces disguised as Ukrainian infantry attacking Ukrainian positions near Bilorivka. If Russian forces dressed in Ukrainian uniforms attacked Ukrainian positions, it would be in violation of the Geneva Convention on War Crimes, which prohibits making improper use of the military insignia and uniform of the enemy. So that would be a war crime. And actually, it's not the first time we've heard about it in that forest area of Kreminna, around Kreminna. So this seems to be a tactic they are using in the area. But the Russians are certainly, I would say, on the offensive at both north and south there. Ukrainians, possibly, according to Russians, push back to a second line of defense in the forest, also being pushed back towards Yampolivka and slightly further north between Chervonopipivka and Ploshchenka. So there is this. Is this an offensive? Is this a Russian offensive? Is it a precursor to an offensive? What is their capacity? What's their capability, etc., etc.? All the usual questions. But it does look like there's been a switch in momentum, and Russians are on the offensive there. Bilorivka, as I said, I think yesterday, there were claims that had been taken by the Russians. As you can see, still these conflicting claims. I've not changed it at all. But we'll move on to what Rybar, the pro-Russian source, says. Not too much different, and not too much detail either. They just said that Russian artillery had precisely struck a Ukrainian supply column near Torska. So Torska is just up here, Torska in that area towards where the Russians are attacking. Yampolivka, Zarichna, Torska. So it continues in the Lysychansk sector. Russian forces took Bilorivka. So Rybar is claiming that it is taken. I'm not representing out on my maps. Ukrainian commanders fortifying defense lines around Siversk and bringing additional forces to the city. Now, this is it. It'll be an interesting development if the Russians had taken Bilorivka, because then Siversk really is in trouble, and a counterattack for the Ukrainians to Kreminna is basically out the picture for the time being, because we have the movement north from the Soledar, sort of northern Bakhmut area. So if I get my little arrows out, so we have the Russians moving up northwards from the villages they've taken just north of Soledar. We have a pushback from Kreminna and towards the west. And then if Bilorivka has been taken, I don't think it has, but if it has, and it might well be taken over the next few days, because if it is taken, then the Russians really are doing some kind of offensive around here. Then Siversk is in trouble. This is going to be quite an objective, Siversk, because it is the key to kind of maintaining a buffer zone, Yes, well, it's a key for the Russians to obtain a buffer zone around Kreminna. So if the Ukrainians lose Siversk, there's no hope of them attacking Kreminna realistically. And if they get this kind of line down there, then this whole sector of the front line is going to be exceptionally useful for the Russians to prevent the Ukrainians from attacking this conurbation of Severodonetsk, Lysychansk, Kreminna, Rubizhne. Okay, so there are lots of pretty lines on the map there, but the point is that actually this is looking quite a useful operational maneuver of the Russians in the area. It's going to give them, if they are successful, a seriously decent buffer zone, and they can then consider pushing on to Kramatorsk, Sloviansk, and Konstantinivka. The time frame of that and the requirement for troops and materiel is a different question. But this is, where they have to start, and they appear to be giving the Ukrainians at least quite a headache in that area. So on the way to Bakhmut, let me just give you the Poulet-Volon map of just around the Kreminna area. Actually, it shows all the advances Russians have made there, and they're pressuring all around there. And then we come down to around Bilorivka, and further down south, we can see they're still pressuring Spiony, Verkhnokho-Mayanska. Defmon says that in the Kreminna area, the AFU has repulsed attacks around Nevska, Bilorivka, and Bilorivka. There's a lot of talk about Russian attacks in the Kreminna area and at Bilorivka. Despite loud barking Russian propagandists, I don't believe there's been a lot of movement in this area. By movement, I mean neither side has gained a lot of ground. There are rumors about Russian forces cutting cell reception in the Luhansk Oblast, so this might be the Russian forces trying to tighten OPSEC for possible troop accumulation and advances. And then we get into the sort of northern Bakhmut area. No reports. Actually, let's put that on the map first. So let's come in here. centralize that. So we are going to go, this is Bakhmut. We are going to go, and just to let you know, in case you don't know, Bakhmut is in the central Donetsk region here. So we come down from Luhansk, just to give you an understanding. I know some people have said this recently. They would like a good understanding of where the borders are. Just to remind you again, I know I did this yesterday. The Luhansk border is here, comes behind Bakhmut, and Donetsk looks something like this. It is on there, but you know, it's not as clear maybe for people watching this on a small phone somewhere. So Bakhmut is right in the middle. And remember, if they want all of this by March, Luhansk and Donetsk, they've got a really tall order there, because it's been that painful for the Russians to take just Bakhmut, and they haven't even done that yet. Anyway, I said that all yesterday. Let's get to the northern area here. So this is Soledar. There is pressure towards Roslivka, Fedorivka, as the Russians have taken Mykolivka and this small village Sakoivanseti there. I'll move my blue lines in a little while. So there's pressure in Krasnopolivka towards the west on these lines. Now, Igor Gherkin apparently said yesterday that this is about moving north to Seversk. So this is exactly what I was discussing yesterday and just now. Like, is this about encircling Bakhmut from this northern region? Actually, it looks like they're going to use this as a way of attacking up through Seversk and probably down through Bilorivka and try and attack it from multiple sides. So that is confirmation of that, Igor Gherkin. Other than that, pressure on Krasnohora is intense from Blahodatny at the north and from the east, as according to all the sources. So ISW says exactly what I'm saying, that they're pretty much attacking everywhere. Rebar says in the Soledar sector, Wagner forces assault units are attacking the Fedorivka-Razalivka line, advancing along the Seversk-Liman highway. So that's mentioning Seversk as well. Russian units continue assaulting Ukrainian positions around Krasnohora and Pavkovivka. In Bakhmut, Wagner units are fighting intensely in the eastern and southern parts of the town. The Ukrainian command is sending in personnel and vehicles to reinforce the defense southwest of Bakhmut. Russian forces are attacking towards Chasiv Yar the Chasiv Yar Bakhmut road. There is continued pressure there. So Null report says in the north of Bakhmut, Wagner forces continue to press in those places we talked about. Fighting is just south of Roslivka and Fedorivka. In addition, there is an attack on Krasnohora from the east, but also the north, where the Russian recently occupied Blahodatny fights are ongoing. In Bakhmut itself, Russian troops have made progress in both the Sobachivka district near the cemetery south and the northeastern parts. Fighting is already taking place in the suburb itself. The question is how long the Ukrainian and heroes at the front can keep the defense. Let's look at a couple of other sources. This is a war map showing the increased territorial the territorial gains from the Russians here, down in Opitny in the south, a little bit of pressure in the east, north around Krasnohora, down from Blahodatny, and then further up north. Actually looks like some increases the other side of the railway line from the kind of Soledar area. So I don't know whether there's some gains across here into the trench area, but certainly there is a lot of pressure going on around Bakhmut. There's fighting in the suburbs, so on and so forth. Kenneth Gregg, who is a Swedish active in Ukraine, he has been in Bakhmut recently. I don't know if he's actually there now. He says Bakhmut, no changes, and the enemy seems to be short of cannon fodder. This has led to smaller. This is in Bakhmut. He talks about north earlier on, but nothing different to what I've said. This has led to smaller attack waves and more normal battles. This means that they now go on with ordinary soldiers with a drive for self-preservation, which is why the advancement does not happen. So this is kind of what I was talking about over the last few days, which is we're starting to see fewer human wave moves from the Wagner and possibly more regular Russian troops doing regular Russian maneuvers. The city has become a fort, and the enemy advance has been absent now for the second day in a row. The spearhead is 6 kilometers away, 7 kilometers to Mykolivka, and 13 kilometers to Konstantinivka. The distance from Chasiv Yar to Bakhmut is 4K, and this is where we run the maintenance into Bakhmut. The main road south of Chasiv Yar is under constant shelling by the enemy. They now have 2 kilometers to the road, but we have positions in between in the forest area. So there you go. This is to give you an idea of what he's talking about here. 2 kilometers to this road, and there are positions in the forest, and this is where the fighting is apparently at the moment, in this forest area there. As you can see, Chasiv Yar, Konstantinivka is not far. Chasiv Yar is not far. So there is strikes on. There have been shelling of Chasiv Yar, Konstantinivka. There are people moving, evacuating from these places on a daily basis now. It was at Kramatorsk that was hit the other day, and only a few people died in basically an apartment block that was taken out. And I was listening to Ukraine, the latest, saying that if that had been, a few months ago, in Kramatorsk, then that you would have had a massive death toll, but that you've just had huge amounts of evacuation in a lot of these places. So that if an apartment block gets taken out, well, you've got four people have died and a bunch of injured people, which is really very low numbers considering. So here you are. The fighting is around here. Pressure would then be on Chasiv Yar. If Bakhmut falls, Chasiv Yar might become the new Bakhmut. Igor Girkin, who I've already mentioned, says that Russians were unable to prevent Ukrainian reinforcements to Bakhmut, indicating Ukrainian resolve to hold the city. So the question on everyone's lips at the moment is, how long before the Ukrainians pull out? They don't want to get completely encircled there. And then there's this interesting article, and I'll read this to you in the extra today. But Bakhmut, 30 Ukrainian troops held off 200 Wagner mercenaries in an insane 10-hour battle, killing or wounding 140. The guns got red hot, and each soldier had 2 to 3 spare rifles, and are using them in turn. Very similar to the film World War Z, where they have a similar sort of thing. And we've heard this a number of times, which is they just keep coming. We're shooting. I've run out of ammunition, or my gun is too hot, or this or that, and they're still coming. And then you're starting to wonder, just how costly this is for the Russian forces. Is this Ukrainian propaganda? Unlikely. I mean, these claims seem to be quite coming thick and fast. First-hand, primary source claims of what is going on the battlefield in Bakhmut. And we are seeing video footage of roads littered with Russian corpses. Question is, are there similar? Is there evidence of the similar situation for Ukrainians? Well, we've not seen it, but does that mean it's not happening? So, are there many Ukrainian dead as well? Always got to try and see whether we are being hoodwinked by propaganda, but I don't think so. I think this really is a difficult front for both sides, and I guess the claims of the Ukrainians are probably 50% worse than they claim, right? So they're claiming, it's bad. It's probably 50% worse. Russians are claiming it's bad. It's probably 100% worse. And that's my general intuitive feeling, is that yes, it's bad for both sides, and yes, they're claiming it's bad, but actually it's probably worse than they're claiming on both sides. But it's just really worse for the Russians because of the nature of the attacks and how they're using their personnel. Anyway, let's move on. But not before we see the Poulet Volant maps, because they're nice and colourful and easy to read. So here we have, let's go and make sure we've got the right one. So Soledar, Bakhmut. That's the Soledar North, and then we have Bakhmut around here. And then so you can see the pushing up towards this forested area there. And then that's the figures that I have. So then it comes on to the Avdivka area. So Avdivka apparently is decreased activity around there, although Vodyanye, just to the south, up towards Siverna, which is here, there is activity here, like I've reported for the last 3 or 4 days, but really that's it. And then moving down to Marinka, same kind of situation, which is Rebar claiming that it's happening in the west. So trying to push the enemy out of the western part of town. Everyone else recognizing that it's just where it has been for the last number of weeks, months, right in the middle of town. fierce fighting, but nothing particularly to report. And then we go down to Vuhledar, which again has seen quite a lot of activity recently. Just to remind you, Vuhledar is on the heights. They have the advantage of having um, visuals from these high apartment blocks down over this southeastern area full of the dachas, full of more rural settlements, and then down to Pavlivka as well. It seems to have rather settled down in Vuhledar over the last sort of 48 hours. For the second day in a row, Rebud doesn't even mention Vuhledar, maybe out of sort of an embarrassment. Deputy Mayor of Vuhledar has said that the Russian forces are no longer trying to break through Ukrainian defenses around Vuhledar, but are instead trying to surround the city from two sides. Another mill blogger noted that the situation around Vuhledar remains very tense and characterized by positional battles. No report says Vuhledar has cooled down. Defmon says Vuhledar's 72nd Mechanized Brigade is another one of the Ukrainian giants. Time after time, they defend against what is considered elite units of the Russian armed forces. So the 155th Naval Infantry Brigade is supposedly, or was, a decent Russian force. They have been taken apart twice now. This is a brigade which were present in Kiev at the start of the invasion and fought against multiple Russian armies, stalling their advance for a week before support arrived. And so on and so forth. So yeah, it's pretty quiet there, and indeed pretty quiet elsewhere along the front in Zaporizhia, and then on to Kherson. Let's have a little look to see what the ISW has to say. Although there's been no fighting on that southern axis, it's been fairly quiet. Ukrainian Joint Press Center of the Tavis Direction Defense Forces stated that Russian President Putin ordered Russian forces to seize Zaporizhia city by March 31st, 2023, and that Russian forces conducted operations to implement Putin's order, likely referring to the localized ground attacks in Zaporizhia Oblast in late January 2023. So it's interesting. So we've heard a number of claims that the Donbass needs to be taken by the end of March, and then this is another claim from a different Ukrainian source saying that Putin has ordered Zaporizhia city to be taken by March the 31st, and that's why we saw these four little attacks around Orikhiv. Goodness me! I mean, if that is a sign of taking Zaporizhia city, good luck with taking Zaporizhia city. I don't know. Who knows what Putin is at? It would seem to me sensible that Putin has ordered the Donbass to be taken. I think it would be unrealistic given Russia's present state of affairs and capacity that they could remotely threaten Zaporizhia. As for Kherson, no particular news coming out of there. There has been, well, actually, let's look at this. A Russian source claimed that Ukrainian forces conducted limited raids near Kulihi and Dovyi Islands south of the Kherson Peninsula on February the 2nd and 3rd. The first reported instance of Ukrainian forces reaching the area south of the Kherson Peninsula since Russian forces initially captured it. There's been no footage of that, but there have also been claims of raids across the Dnipro as well. And the routine sort of artillery strikes in the usual places along the Dnipro. So here we have the Kherson Peninsula. What islands exactly they are, and what I'm not 100% sure, but I have to look into that. But some activities around the peninsula somewhere. Corley, goodness me, is that where it would be? Surely not. Was that what they said? Let's have a look at that. Cruelly, I don't know. There are so many alternate spellings of these places. Would that be the place? Surely not. Anyway, that would be quite amazing if they got in all the way down there. I mean, that is south of the Kherson Peninsula, but coming all the way down there, it would be rather risky. But I can't see any islands, any other islands south of the south of the peninsula. Okay, I've done some snooping around the internet, and it appears that actually it is over here. So it's these kind of areas, these sort of sandy bars that are technically islands, I guess. So just these ones there. So rather than attacking across here, they appear to have gone, if these claims are true, to have gone around the spits onto this part of the peninsula and attacked here, maybe to get a foothold to move south. I don't know why that would be a particularly useful place and not here, or not there. I don't know, but anyway, that's what the ISW reports. We'll keep an eye on that. Anyway, there you go. That's the frontline for the frontline update for the 4th of February. Hope that's useful for you. Please like, subscribe, and share. Thank you for your support. All the ways you can support the channel in the description below. Please keep an eye out for the interview I do with my Iranian friends later to give you a greater geopolitical understanding of, I don't know, the world, but there's also some elements of where we talk about Russia as well. So keep an eye out for that. And I am going to try and do a live tonight with Andrew Perpetua, who's a pro-Ukrainian mapper and sort of active on social media and does YouTubes of his own. So please keep an eye out for that. It might have to be on my Atypical Philosopher channel rather than my ATP Geopolitics channel. I will do a post and link to that. I cannot do lives from this channel at the moment due to some technical issues that the company that I do my live streaming through is trying to sort out. So at the moment I do my lives through my Atypical Philosopher channel. So apologies, but check it out over there. Anyway, Toodle Pips, speak to you later.